If you or somebody you know is dealing with prostate cancer, then you don't want to miss this episode of the Healthy Reasonings podcast.
Welcome to the Healthy Reasonings podcast with Dr. Andre. You are now listening to your number one source for clear, unfiltered conversations about your health and wellness. Join us every Tuesday for success stories, educational topics, and interviews with wellness experts from around the world. You can listen to this podcast on your computer, phone, or any other electronic device that streams podcasts, or download each episode and listen to it on the go. Let's get started with today's episode.
All right, welcome back, Healthy Reasoners. And this is episode 30, I believe, of the Healthy Reasonings podcast. That's a milestone. Every time we hit a milestone, I think it's time to celebrate. And 30 is a good number. I'm excited about the fact that we've hit 30. I intend to hit 40. I intend to hit 50 and to keep going. So I want to, first of all, thank all of you who have listened to all 30 episodes of the Healthy Reasonings podcast, your number one podcast for unfiltered information about your health and wellness. And we are going to be changing gears a little bit. I know you'd have enjoyed episodes 28 and 29 with two of my good friends, Professor Saupe and Dr. Marina Yanova. And their information that they shared was just absolutely phenomenal. And I know I've gotten a lot of good feedback about both of their journeys, both of them quite remarkable in their own respect. And so that sets the stage now for me to go into a little bit more detail about the way I view certain types of illness. And today we're going to be speaking about specifically my thoughts on prostate cancer. And it's going to be an interesting ride. So I want to preface it by saying, as usual, that the opinions that I will share are not intended to be medical advice specifically for you. My healthy reasoners know this. If you are dealing with prostate cancer or any other health challenge, I encourage you to seek attention from your nearest or preferred healthcare provider, whoever that may be, and not to act solely on the advice or opinions that I am sharing here, because they're not intended to be advice specific to you. And this episode is going to be particularly, we're going to go out there. We're going to go way out there. So it's going to be important for you to have your thinking hats on and not to necessarily act on what I'm sharing, but to let it permeate. And if necessary, to discuss with your healthcare provider any concerns that you may have or any areas that you think are applicable to you. All right, so we are talking about prostate cancer. And I believe that at this point in 2025, when we're recording this episode, it's highly unlikely that there's anybody who A, doesn't know someone with prostate cancer, and B, has not heard about prostate cancer before. So we're going to run through a few of the established facts and information that tends to be out in the public sphere about prostate cancer. And then we're going to go full steam ahead into the way I look at it. So first of all, the prostate, as we know, is an organ, a gland, that essentially straddles the outflow tract of the urinary tract in males. And the prostate gland is particularly important because it contributes to the production of seminal fluid, which is critical for the formation of, the semen that is a part of conception and so on. Very much a very masculine gland. Just to state clearly that women do not have prostates. And because of its interesting location, it is intimately related to the bladder on one hand, and also to the male reproductive organs on another. And much of what we discuss around prostate cancer in general in the general culture, the zeitgeist that exists, centers around the fact that as men get older, as we as men get older, the dynamic of the hormones, that the male hormones that are involved with the prostate, changes. And because this dynamic changes, the balance that normally exists between the different types of hormones that impact the growth of the prostate changes as well. And as a result of that, there is a potential for some of the cells in the prostate gland to grow in a way that is unregulated, and essentially for prostate cancer to form. And I'm sure by now we all are aware as well that it is recommended that the prostate gland be examined at age 40 as a screening tool. So normally, because of its relationship with the rectum, it's close to the rectum, it's easy for a medical doctor to examine the prostate almost directly by what we call a digital rectal examination. And that is intended to find out if there are any areas of the prostate that have changed their shape or texture or size, and in so doing to alert us as medical professionals to the possibility that there is abnormal growth within the prostate, which could signal cancer. All right, so we've cleared that ground. The second thing to note is that generally speaking, the treatment for prostate cancer is divided into, let's use 3 types. And this continues to be something that is a source of dynamic shifts in views of how prostate cancer is treated. But largely, the treatment falls into 3 categories. One is something called active surveillance or watchful waiting, meaning in some gentlemen, depending on age and other factors, it is decided by the healthcare professional that, hey, because this thing is unlikely to grow quickly, and because there's no the risk of putting this person through treatment versus monitoring them closely before in implementing treatment, because the risks are greater than just watching them, usually these patients are observed over time and a blood test is done and monitored. This test is known as a PSA, and it's monitored frequently to see if there's any evidence that the prostate cancer is progressing. And of course, the only way to be sure if there's prostate cancer there, just to get that out of the way, is to do something called a prostate biopsy, in which a tiny piece of the prostate gland is pinched off and examined under the microscope in the lab to see what the cells look like. So as with any cancer, the only way to be sure that there is prostate cancer there is to actually look at the tissue. Now, the second way to treat prostate cancer can involve surgery. And this may involve different types of surgery. Again, it's a dynamic discussion that's taking place, but the surgery varies from removing the entire prostate under open surgery to doing laparoscopic surgery, to doing cryosurgery, to doing robotic surgery. What else can I think of there? My urologist friends, please reach out to me if I'm saying anything that needs updating. I'm just speaking very broadly here because this is not really the focus of today's talk. I'm just laying the foundation. And of course, the concern with surgery often is that the surgery is usually effective at removing the prostate cancer itself, but the concern is whether or not there will be damage to the surrounding structures. And we discussed a few of them earlier, the male reproductive organs, and of course the bladder is nearby, the rectum is nearby, lots of nerves are running in that region. And so there's always that kind of a concern, both on the part of the patient and to a lesser extent on the part of the doctor, about whether there is too much risk involved in doing surgery. But largely that tends to be the treatment of choice in the appropriate patient. And then finally, there is something called medical management. And again, it's something that is still being fine-tuned. The selection of patients for the specific types of treatment, finding the right patient and matching them to the appropriate treatment is still something that ever since I was in medical school, we've been trying to find the best way to do it. And I'm very proud to say that I, as a cancer specialist, I really don't end up having to see prostate cancer myself very often because the urology specialist, the male reproductive system specialists, do such a good job of controlling it and treating it and managing it effectively on their end that it generally doesn't have to reach to me for any intervention. So medical management largely consists of trying to get the hormone levels to the point where the prostate gland no longer gets enough stimulation from the male hormones in order to stop those cells from growing, because they're largely dependent for the most part on the male hormones to facilitate their growth. And so different types of treatments are implemented to try and suppress, for example, testosterone. And what we do is we try to push the patient towards a point where they're considered to be medically castrated, meaning their testosterone levels are so low that the prostate cells then do not get enough of the male hormone that they need for the cancer to continue growing, and it is largely held in place, so to speak. All right, I tried my best to do a good job of describing the landscape that exists for prostate cancer at the moment. I was very simplistic in how I described it. I really could have gone into a lot more detail, but I don't want to for the purposes of today. How many of you healthy reasoners know the 4 principles of a good cancer treatment protocol? I want to let you know that I was recently on a private webinar call with some guests of Ryan Sternigal. And one of the things that I said out of nowhere was actually supposed to be reserved for my upcoming book. But I said them anyway, and I've said them on this podcast, so it's no secret. There are 4 aspects to a good cancer treatment protocol. One is whatever the protocol is, it must be able to destroy the cancer cells. It must damage them and destroy them, whatever it is that we're using. So that's one feature. 2 is that the protocol has to have within it an option that provides adequate nutrition, including vitamins, minerals, and nutrients, to facilitate repair of the damaged areas and rebuilding of the tissue and organs around the body after the other part of the protocol has done its work. So that's 2. Number 3 is that there must be adequate detoxification available to facilitate removal of the waste products, the damaged tissue, the breakdown products of the whatever treatment was implemented, everyday waste generated by the body, new waste that may have been introduced to the body because of outside sources, chemicals such as our skincare products and so on. All of these things need to be able to flow quickly away from where they're located in order to get the body ready to repair itself quickly without any interference. So if you think of remodeling a house, an old house, and you're doing a fixer-upper, the first step has to be demolition. But then even before there is putting in the new walls or drywall or whatever it is you're using, you must sweep away the debris from the demolition, don't you? You must. And so detoxification is critical. And then finally, we have to insist, because we're not dealing with a piece of paper or a robot or a piece of software, we're dealing with a human being. It's absolutely important to ensure that all patients diagnosed with cancer get our 4th arm of the treatment, a good cancer treatment protocol, which is emotional and spiritual support. So 4 arms. So our healthy reasoners, therefore, and if you are just joining our podcast for the first time, welcome. You are now an official healthy reasoner. And I must let you know that having given you those 4 bits of information, you should see where I'm going with this podcast, this episode today. And where I'm going is simply this, that the status quo as it pertains to prostate cancer, in my opinion, does not adhere to the protocol that I've outlined before, the 4 steps or the 4 arms that are necessary for effective treatment of cancer. Simply because I described to you what generally happens with prostate cancer treatment. And if you were paying keen attention, you would see that number 1 has been carefully taken care of. Number 1 being destruction of the cancer cells. And this may take the form of either surgery or, I forgot to mention, even radiation as an option. We spoke about the hormonal manipulation that helps to starve the cancer cells from what they might need and switch the balance up so that they're not able to proliferate. So that those 2 largely are focused on the cancer cells themselves. And yet, having treated cancers of various kinds in various capacities of my training, including a lot of prostate cancer here in Jamaica where I practice, I've seen time and time again where the traditional approach to treating prostate cancer works up to a point, and then after a while you start having to play catch up. Meaning, the cancer is held in a position for a certain amount of time, but then depending on the treatment choice that was used, there's still something that needs to be tweaked or twisted or monitored in these patients, especially if medical management is used. So that means, and this is not by any means a criticism of the existing treatment, it is just an acknowledgement that, as we all know as healthcare professionals, we still have not quite hit the mark of universally being able to treat prostate cancer. So what that means then is we need to look at what else could be missing. And it's pretty obvious, as there are 4 things, and we've only addressed 1. So the second thing is going to be the nutrition for these patients and ensuring that they have vital nutrients and minerals available to them in order to facilitate rebuilding of the damaged areas. But more often than not, what I find to be lacking in prostate cancer are the last 2 features of a good cancer treatment protocol. And we're going to take a quick break, and I'm going to come back in to tell you exactly what I have noticed in the past 18, almost 19 years of treating prostate cancer. We'll be right back.
In a world that moves too fast, it's easy to lose touch with what truly matters, your well-being. At Teshuva Wellness, we believe in a return to balance, to healing, to your best self. Our holistic approaches nurture not just your body, but also your soul. Whether you're seeking peace, energy, or a deeper connection, we're here to guide you every step of the way. Our medical experts specialize in holistic treatments for chronic diseases, ranging from autoimmune illnesses to cancer. Our treatments are safe, non-toxic, and effective. Because at Teshuva Wellness, your journey to wellness is our greatest commitment. Visit our website today at teshuvawellnessja.com or call 1-876-787-8197. That's 1-876-787-8197. Teshuva Wellness. Return to health. Return to your best self.
And we're back. Did a little bit of a cliffhanger there, but I had been talking for 18 minutes nonstop, so I thought it'd be good to take a little break and let my lungs get a refresh and let your ears get a chance to hear something other than my voice. I hope you enjoyed that break. So we were at the point where we were talking about the fact that the status quo for prostate cancer largely centers around the cancer cells themselves. And this is often the case with cancer in general. Prostate cancer is no exception. But I've noticed some patterns that I think are critical for us to talk about, because it is never enough to simply treat cancer cells, destroy cancer cells. It's never enough, because we're not dealing with a computer here with a virus on it. There's so many analogies. Let's leave it alone. So let's jump into what I've observed. Well, what I've observed is this. In order to get prostate cancer to the body to heal effectively from prostate cancer, we must incorporate primarily detoxification of some kind, and I'll tell you exactly what I've observed, as well as it is very important for these patients to have an outlet to express their emotions. Let's tackle the first one, detoxification. Well, I'm going to go into a little bit of medical, I'm going to launch off into some medical science really quick, and I'll probably do another episode to explain what I'm about to say in more detail. But I've observed repeatedly in patients with prostate cancer that there seems to be, when I test them, quite a bit of heavy metals and other toxins around. So I've either seen heavy metals in large quantities, which include mercury, lead, arsenic, you name it. Yeah. Or what I tend to see is quite a bit of agricultural pesticides. Those are present in abundance in prostate cancer patients. And I dare say that because I live in Jamaica, you can look up the incidence of prostate cancer in Jamaica as compared to the rest of the world, and you'll see where I'm going with that. I think it's fair to say that my opinion carries some amount of weight in terms of what I've seen, both when I function in the conventional space and also now that I'm doing more integrative cancer work. So the question becomes then, how can I, well, let's jump into what I do. So generally what I do is I'll test these patients to see what their heavy metal levels look like. I'll also check to see what their levels of pesticides are. And sometimes it's pretty easy to determine what's going on, because a lot of these people will have backgrounds of either being exposed to quite a bit of heavy metals knowingly or unknowingly. And I'm not going to go into why that. I'll just mention briefly that that is a problem in certain areas of our island, because the soil has a lot of mining being done in certain areas. And sometimes we have mining being done adjacent to areas where agriculture is being done. So you can understand, therefore, where the pesticide might come in. So a lot of these gentlemen come from areas where both mining and or farming is done. And a lot of them are farmers themselves. And what I find interesting is that when I do a specific type of detoxification, which I probably won't go into detail, it doesn't make sense for this episode, I'll hold that one back for a little bit. But there's a specific detox that I do for my patients, and the results are always overwhelming for them when they see how much sludge emerges into the toilet after they do this particular detoxification. They usually come back with their eyes wide open, like, oh my goodness, doc, you would not believe how much stuff came out into the toilet. And simultaneously, what tends to happen is a lot of them will report feeling a lot better. That's one. Two, they'll report being able to do a lot more manual labor with no difficulty. And I can point to 1, 2, maybe 3 cases in particular in which it was pretty obvious that a big lump or an obviously damaged area of the body as a result of this prostate cancer, the lump shrank, or the area of the body was restored to normal, or their blood levels returned to normal, and so on and so forth. So there is an element of detoxification that is being missed in the treatment of prostate cancer. That goes without saying. And again, I want to be very clear that all 4 elements must be done in tandem. So I am in no way suggesting that the treatment for prostate cancer is only, I'm not saying that it is only detoxification, but I am saying that the treatment for prostate cancer needs to incorporate both an effective treatment for the cancer cell destruction, as well as detoxification, as well as nutrition with vitamins, minerals, and nutrients, and also spiritual and emotional assistance. And I didn't touch too hard on the detox. Suffice it to say that time after time, I've seen where the detoxification is what is critical for tipping this patient towards healing if they were already doing other types of treatment. Once I add the detox on board, the results are often phenomenal. And then finally, spiritual and emotional support. Well, here are a few of my experiences. Most of the gentlemen that join my practice for assistance with prostate cancer would do so for one of two reasons. One, either they had already been treated conventionally because they had gone through the original treatment that was recommended. Again, I mentioned that as an oncologist, I would not see a lot of prostate cancer anyway. Or two, they were uncomfortable with what was being recommended to them and they wanted to know what their options were. Now, I try my best to be very responsible in how I advise my patients on what their options are, and largely our discussion takes the form of what I've just shared with you for the past 25 minutes. And so I want to make sure that we are both responsible in what we ultimately decide. Well, here's a profile of the patient that normally comes to see me. One, usually these gentlemen are very independent people who are self-made, largely self-made, people who are running a business in some capacity and are used to being able to handle their own affairs. And so one could understand, therefore, that being diagnosed with prostate cancer doesn't help, because it becomes then an opportunity for a man to start looking at his own mortality, to start looking at the fact that he's not invincible. And it's sometimes the first time that they have had to face their own mortality, to face the fact that you do have a weakness of some kind. There is something that could harm you, and it's a very uncomfortable feeling. And not to mention the fact that a lot of the treatments that are recommended to them in their minds are further going to decrease their masculinity, either by affecting their performance in the bedroom, potentially, or affecting their male hormone levels and so on. And so it's a very difficult crisis for many of these gentlemen. But that being said, what I've also noticed is that one, a lot of the gentlemen who come to see me for assistance would have had issues in life that they were already dealing with even before the diagnosis, and perhaps not dealing with them so well. And these issues tend to center around family relationships of various kinds. And so what has always fascinated me is that I can think of two gentlemen in particular, and if you're listening, you know who you are. Greetings to both of you. They have been, we've been working together for the past 8, almost 9 years now. Neither of them has ever done surgery or radiation. We've been employing these principles that I'm speaking about here. And what we've observed together is whenever either of them becomes stressed, and that stress usually centers around something happening with family relationships, what tends to happen is that the PSA level goes up. And one could argue and say, oh, well, maybe it's just a coincidence. But how do you explain that when they get back on track with their coping skills, the PSA level goes back down to the point now where we laugh about it? And when they come for their usual checkup and we look at that PSA level and it's up, there's a sheepish smile that always emerges, because they say, okay, doc, I know what you're going to ask me. This is what has been happening at home, or this is what has been happening with business. One of our suppliers has not been this or whatever. And it's amazing to see how getting the emotions back in balance has an impact on the PSA level. So, and I'm trying to be very careful about which stories I share. I know the gentlemen are probably watching, so I don't want to overstep the boundaries here. But time after time, both with my local patients and overseas, I've seen it happen, where the PSA in particular, which is a surrogate marker for monitoring the prostate cancer, will go up or down depending on the emotional state and the stress level that the patient is dealing with. And I say this in the context of everything else being done for the patient, something being done to effectively destroy cancer cells, adequate nutrition, as well as adequate detox. The emotional component is a fourth arm, and usually what tends to happen is I have the joy of watching that go up and down depending on how compliant the patient is with their coping skills. Many of you would have remembered Dee Whitaker. She was in episode 8 of the Healthy Reasonings podcast. We're now at episode 30. And she shared a lot about her experiences with working with emotional coaching for patients, and over the past few years, working with my patients in particular. I'm going to have her back shortly, so I know she's been requested multiple times to be back on the show. And I may just ask her to talk a little bit about the type of personality that tends to get, let's go with prostate cancer. She's probably seen a lot more breast cancer from my referrals, but that's besides the point. And so we'll get the opportunity to talk a lot more about what happens with the emotions and prostate cancer. So, so here's where we are now. I wanted to sprinkle in a few things here. Jamaica is very popular for its use of guinea hen weed or garlic weed, which is an herb that is endemic to our nation. And it's probably known as anamu in your culture. Very potent herb, because the early scientific studies have demonstrated clearly that it has what is known as cytotoxic activity. What that means is that it has the ability to kill rapidly dividing cells such as cancer cells. So it's toxic to cells, cytotoxic. And so a lot of the discussion around prostate cancer in my local context tends to center around the use of guinea hen weed and other herbs to treat prostate cancer. And my counter to that is, as I've said throughout this episode, it is really only addressing one aspect of the effective treatment of prostate cancer. And it is time now for us, starting with Jamaicans and extending to our colleagues across the world, to start looking at a more comprehensive approach to treating, in this case, prostate cancer. And I'll be applying the same principles to other types of cancer in subsequent episodes. But truthfully, whilst all 4 arms of a good cancer treatment protocol are critical, my own personal experience is that the importance of each arm varies from cancer to cancer. And so in prostate cancer, I think perhaps the most important arm for me is a detox arm. All of them have to be present, but I'm always more concerned about what's happening with the detoxification. And And if we are able to get these patients nicely balanced with their detox, and we have support from the other three arms, it's always amazing to see how well they're able to do. I don't think I can speak any more on this topic, because I know that a lot of what I've said is already quite revolutionary. And I don't want to add too much fuel to that fire just yet. I'm probably gonna let you guys just sit with this one. And I welcome questions. I always welcome questions. I welcome comments. I am constantly learning. As I grow, I learn from my patients, even as they get well, even as they heal, even as some of them experience challenges, I learn. And as I learn, I share as best as I can, so that hopefully I can stimulate in the mind of a healthy reasoner something that then is able to be added to the whole discussion. And ultimately, I believe that we will, like with many other diseases in the history of mankind, we will be able to find ways to effectively heal cancer, as we have found ways to heal so many other diseases. So I'm going to leave you with a quick note about how you can get in touch with me. And then I think we're going to just call it the end of this episode 30, the Healthy Reasonings podcast. Every now and then, for those of you who follow me on Instagram, remember, wellness.jamaica is my Instagram username. When I am inspired to do so, I will jump on and do a live session. We were hoping to do it regularly every Wednesday, but still trying to fine-tune some of the details to work on a time that suits you. So please indicate to me what time would be good. You can send your messages. You know how it is. You're going to see it in the ad that comes up. So bless you guys. Take care until I see you the next time. Send your questions, send your comments. I'm here for you on the Healthy Reasonings podcast. God bless.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Healthy Reasonings podcast. Remember to subscribe to this podcast so you can be updated as soon as new episodes are ready. If you have a question, send us a voice note on WhatsApp or a WhatsApp message. The WhatsApp number is 1-876-405-7831. For more information or to become a sponsor, please email wellnessdocjamaica@gmail.com. See you soon.